Okay, welcome to High Cheese with Darren Maloney. Today is Friday, April 1st, 2022. And today I'm coming to you from rural Pennsylvania, rural Northeast Pennsylvania, beautiful part of the country. And I highly recommend anybody who wants to visit a beautiful part of the country, come here. So, as I said, today is April 1st, April Fool's Day. And I really wish I could tell you an April Fool's joke that said that we had an incompetent president and an incompetent administration. But I can't tell you that. We have an incompetent president and an incompetent administration to the point where it's dangerous. And so, what I want to do is I'm just going to go to a couple of clips and point out the most recent blunders of Joe Biden. And they came out yesterday when he said he was going to pull 1 million barrels per day out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And the second item is he's going to start trying to push leaseholders of land for oil to start pumping or get penalized. So let me just go to the first clip here, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Today, I'm authorizing the release of 1 million barrels per day for the next 6 months, over 180 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And it is by far the largest release of our national reserve in our history. It will provide a historic amount of supply for a historic amount of time, a 6 months bridge to the fall, to deny Putin the ability to weaponize his energy resources against American families and families and democracies around the world.
Okay, again, this is another piece of junk policy by Biden. Now, the Strategic Oil Reserve is a reserve of oil. I think there's a total capacity of about 700 million barrels that are located throughout the United States. And right now, I think we have about 600 million barrels available. So what Biden wants to do is take 180 million of those barrels over the next 6 months. Now, isn't it surprising that he wants to take this right through November, right going into the midterm elections? How ironic is that? Does he think we don't see through this? Does he think this is not a political attempt to stabilize gas prices? Now, the unfortunate thing, I don't think he thinks we realize this. Now, the other thing, too, is that the Strategic Oil Reserve essentially was supposed to help us during times of war, when oil has a tendency to spike, and we use that to offset any spike as a result of a war that we got into. I think George Bush had released 50 million or 60 million barrels right after the Iraqi war. I think that was the last time we did it in wartime. And Biden released 50 million barrels last November, and it didn't work. Essentially, you get a blip. You get a short-term blip in price reductions, but then it just goes right back to market effects, because the market always finds its equilibrium point. Now, you may create a small arbitrage situation when you're suddenly dumping all of this oil, but eventually the market reaches its state of equilibrium, and at this point it's high prices. So, apparently he thinks politically he'll be able to stabilize this over the next 6 months, or it will give him some political hook to say, I've stabilized prices. Because when we're facing $4 per gallon gasoline, say in October of 2022, he can always say, oh, it would have been worse. It's because I released all this oil from the reserve, which is just not true. And you're going to find out this is not true. But again, it's a weak attempt by a feeble-minded man to play politics with oil. Now, the other thing, too, I just wanted to point out is that, look, Biden's already sent a message early on, previous to the war, that we're not going to get involved. And this is just another message to Putin that the U.S. will not get involved. Because what happens if you get involved with ground troops? You have to use oil for your military. And that's one of the reasons you have the Strategic Oil Reserve. Because what happens, you send your military to Ukraine, they need oil, causes a spike in oil because of the demand, as well as the uncertainty in the oil markets that wars create, and it's offset by the reserve. So if we're depleting our reserve, we're getting closer to the point where we don't have anything for the military. Now, I'm not saying we're at that point yet, but essentially you're sending a message to Putin again and say, hey, look, there'll be no boots on the ground. Now, I don't believe them from this point. Biden is so incompetent, he could make a mistake where somebody can use his incompetence to create a false flag to get NATO into the war. That's what concerns me more so than anything at this point right now. Now, the other thing I just wanted to point out, too, is at the end of that clip, he mentioned how Putin is weaponizing oil against the people of America. And I find that really ironic, but I do find it very Democratic Party-like. They're accusing Putin of doing what we've already done. Now, what do you think these sanctions were intended to do against Russia? Their intention is to hurt the Russian people. So I find it ironic that Biden is saying, oh, he's using this as a weapon against the American people. Well, guess what, Biden? Those sanctions everybody has put on Putin are intended to hurt the Russian people. Not Putin, but the Russian people. And it's called projection. Accuse your opponent of what you're doing. And he just can't get out. He's so old school, democratic, liberal establishment that he's got to project no matter what. But anyway, let's go to the next clip and then we'll come back and discuss.
Sitting on nearly 9,000 unused but approved permits for production on federal lands, or more than 1 million unused acres they have a right to pump on. To help execute this first part of my plan, I'm calling for a use it or lose it policy. Congress should make companies pay fees on wells on federal leases they haven't used in years, and acres of public land they're hoarding without production. But those sitting on unused leases and idle wells will either have to start producing or pay the price for their inaction.
Biden just exacerbated the problem. It was 1 or 2 episodes ago, I told you the problem with more drilling by the drillers is that they're concerned that they won't have access to future leases. Now, you have to understand is that these drillers have to lay a ton of money when they start drilling on a piece of land. And many times, that land comes up dry, nothing. So, and I used an example before. Say a driller leases 10 parcels of land, and they spend millions of dollars on the first one. It comes up dry. Second one comes up dry. Third one comes up dry. All of them come up dry. So they're out millions and millions of dollars. And why would they expend that time and money if they have no confidence that there'll be more leases available in the future? So they're just going to sit back and wait until the environment is better for them. It's just a pure business decision. And what Biden's doing here is just saying, yep, that's essentially what we're doing. We're going to force you to expend money on property that you would not have otherwise drilled on. So let me just go to an article, description of the lease process. This is from the AmericanProgress.org website, which is not a conservative website. And it's an article from 2018. And let me just read you a little bit about the process. And there's one figure in here that jumps out to me, and I'll just explain to you. It says the process by which federal lands and oil and gas reserves are managed by the federal government has long been criticized for the outdated and imbalanced incentive structure, the Mineral Leasing Act, which authorized the U.S. Department of the Interior to lease federal lands for extractive purposes, has undergone a few changes since it passed Congress back in 1920. Royalty rates, bid minimums, and lease development terms have largely remained stagnant. According to the Congressional Budget Office, between 2003 and 2012, the federal government leased about 25,000 parcels, averaging 1,000 acres in each size. at least half of those for less than $10 per acre, and about 4,000 parcels received no bids and were leased non-competitively. 4,000 parcels. So you think about it. Biden is saying that there's 9,000 available parcels, leases. And this is saying 4,000 parcels weren't bid on. And the reason they weren't bid on is questionable whether they can produce any oil. So they negotiate some type of lease with somebody because nobody will bid on them competitively. So there's 4,000 parcels like that. No one really wanted. No one wanted them enough to bid on. So the time frame's a little different, but I'm sure you'll have a significant amount of that 9,000, those 9,000 leases were non-competitive leases, which means that no one bid on them, so they had to negotiate some type of lease arrangement with somebody because nobody wanted them. So now the federal government, or what Biden wants to do, is force these drillers to drill on these acres that everybody deemed during the bidding process really were likely not to produce oil or gas. And this is what is bizarre about the Biden administration. They have no concept of business. They have no concept of how people work. And right now, it's all a political game. And again, it's dangerous. If you want people to drill, you let the drillers know that they will have access to future leases. They don't want access to these 4,000 leases that everybody agreed likely can't produce oil or gas. So you know what they're going to wind up doing? They'll hand them back. You take it. I don't want them. If Congress is going to come in and start charging these people for not drilling, they'll just say, hey, take it back. Or they'll put it in court. Because I don't know if you can change the lease agreement during the term of the lease. So where's that going to get you, Biden? You know, maybe there's a small nugget of your voters that, hey, yeah, that's great. But you know as well as I do, they're not bright people. You're just fooling them. But most Americans today, they're not being fooled by you. And the polls show it. Now, I think I mentioned before that Biden was projecting about the sanctions that the world put on Russia, at least the globalist world put on Russia. And there's just a couple of articles that I want to read to you. The first one is from, this is from the Epoch Times. And it says the IMF warns that sanctions against Russia threatens to weaken the dominance of the dollar. And let me read a little bit of it. It says here, the recent financial sanctions imposed on Russia for its invasion of the Ukraine are threatening to weaken the dominance of the U.S. petrodollar as the world's currency. And I think I mentioned that 1 or 2 episodes ago. Said First Deputy Managing Director Gita Gopinath of the IMF. Now, the IMF is one of those globalist organizations. The sanctions may result in a more fragmented international monetary system, warned Gopinath. Now, here's the kicker on this thing. She had previously said that the sanctions against Russia would not foreshadow the demise of the dollar as the world's reserve currency, and that the Ukraine crisis would slow growth but not cause a global recession. And this is the problem I have with these experts. Now, Gita Gopinath came out when the sanctions were issued, saying, oh, it's not going to have there won't be any issue for the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. No, it's okay. Well, now she's saying the exact opposite. She's saying, oh, yeah, there may be an effect on the United States dollar as the world's reserve currency. And again, don't believe these people. Things are good until they're not good. And that's the problem I have with Wall Street right now. That's the problem I have with all of our institutions. Everything is good until it's not good. Now, related to this, here's another article I just wanted to talk about. And this is from our friends at the Washington Post. And here it says here, despite Western sanctions, Russian ruble and banks are recovering. It's here, Russian ruble and banking system are showing continued signs of recovery from the initial punch of sanctions as Moscow relies on energy exports and currency controls to partly protect the nation's economy. After initially plummeting, the ruble has rebounded and is edging closer to the value it held before the war began. according to the official exchange rate. And the banking system is gradually stabilizing as panicked customer withdrawals subside, economists said. And the problem is what are the globalists going to do when they fail at this? Now, clearly, Russia is going to be hurt by the sanctions, but there will not be a collapse. And I think Neil Ferguson in one of my episodes mentioned that Putin will not be overthrown, even if things go bad for him in the war. So my alert to you is, what are the globalists going to do once they acknowledge failure? Now, I know they're trying to put a spin on the war. They're trying to spin this war that Ukraine is going to win. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're trying to. Now, they're going to also have to put some type of spin on these sanctions and how they worked against Russia. Because right now, from a ruble standpoint and from a banking standpoint, Russia is bouncing back. So again, we shall see. And as much as Russia is dangerous, I think some of these globalists are dangerous also. Okay, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back. Okay, welcome back. Well, I guess everybody's commenting on Will Smith's smacking of Chris Rock, and I guess I'll have my comment. First of all, I think it's ridiculous. I think we're putting too much into this whole thing. No one cares about these actors. I don't care about these actors. I don't care about the Oscars. But here's what I want to say. Will Smith, you should have got your money's worth. You should have closed your fist and punched the guy. A smack is effeminate. A smack is something your wife would have done. A man would have punched the guy. Now, I'm not advocating violence, but if you're going to do something physical with another guy, punch him. Now, if you don't want to hurt him that bad, punch him in the chest or in the stomach. But a smack? You smack like a girl. Maybe not a transgender girl, but you smack like a girl. So Will, just punch him next time. That's all. And again, I'm not advocating violence, but punch the guy. Additionally, this whole thing about whether they should have taken him out or not. And this is the hypocrisy of what goes on with the left. Under normal circumstances, the cops would have been all over Will Smith, whether it was a smack or a punch or whatever. And here's this whole game about, whether they should arrest or not. Yeah, they should arrest him. And then you had Whoopi Goldberg making a comment about, it's better that they didn't escort a black man out of the Oscars. Why? Look, Whoopi, you got to understand, whether you're black or white, it shouldn't matter. And somebody like you keeps on pushing racism. And quite frankly, Whoopi, if you're listening, if you advocate a black man not getting arrested for something like this or for getting escorted out of the Oscars, you're actually promoting the fact that you're a racist by simply saying black men should be treated differently than white guys or Chinese people or any other American. But Whoopi's just a wound up ball of rubber bands. But that's all I'm going to say. Hope it wasn't too much. Now, what I want to do is I want to switch to Hunter Biden. And a lot's gone on this past week with Hunter Biden. So what's happened yesterday, is that, and this is from the New York Post, Republican members of a House panel sent a letter on Thursday to the White House and the National Archives demanding records of any communication between Hunter Biden and the White House during the 2 terms of the Obama administration when his father was vice president. Hunter Biden's connection throughout the Russian sphere of influence have now become especially relevant in the fast-moving and developing Russian war in Ukraine. The Republicans on the House Oversight Committee wrote in the letters, which were obtained by the New York Post. If the Russian government is attempting to influence American policy in Ukraine by exploiting Hunter Biden's connection with his father, the President of the United States, the American people, deserve to know it, the letter said. And they should. This thing is ever expanding. And in spite of the mainstream media just slow walking this through their system, they're not going to be able to ignore it if things play out like they should. Related to that, and Trump's funny. Trump asked Putin to release information that he has on a $3.5 million wire from Elena Baturina to Hunter Biden. Former President Donald Trump publicly called on Putin on Tuesday to release any dirt he may have on Hunter Biden, the president's son. Trump, in an interview with Just the News, seized on a claim about Biden obtaining a hefty payment from Elena Baturina, the former wife of the late mayor of Moscow, and asked Putin to provide details. I think that's funny. But I think it's relevant, and I think it's Trump. If he can get that information, and that's a good thing. The key thing with Hunter Biden right now is Merrick Garland, because you have to understand is that this prosecution, and apparently it's hit the grand jury level, is still under Merrick Garland, the political hack, the one that has threatened parents showing up at Board of Education meetings, the Department of Justice head that has threatened Arizona auditors. So this guy's a hack, and he's the only problem we have in this process, I think, other than corrupt prosecutors. You have to understand is that Garland can control what Biden is going to be charged with. So he can have information on Biden that he's withholding in the sense that he won't charge Biden with it because it leads to Joe Biden, his boss. From all information that I can gather, Biden has an IRS issue. He hasn't paid back taxes. He's got a money laundering issue, and he's got an issue with not filing as a foreign agent. So he's got those 3 problems. There's likely more. The problem is there's so much more that can come out of these indictments. And the problem is Merrick Garland going to go after the president as a result of this? I can see him holding back, just ignoring it. Throw Hunter Biden under the bus. And when you think about it, Hunter Biden is Joe Biden's bag man. And what kind of father makes your son, your crack addicted son, a bag man? This is something you see in local politics in Hudson County. The corrupt officials always have their bagmen to collect for them. But your son, your crack addicted son, you make your bag man? That's low. That really is low. And hopefully more comes out. But right now it's very promising with Hunter Biden. It appears he'll likely get indicted on something. Now, the thing I think leads me to believe he'll get indicted at least on not paying his taxes is that he made $1 million tax payment to the IRS about a month or 2 ago. And that leads me to believe they're trying to mitigate what the indictment is going to be or what his defense is going to be. Because the prosecution will come out and say, hey, you didn't pay your taxes. You have evaded paying taxes. And Hunter Biden will say, well, thank you so much for helping me find out that I owed $1 million. But I paid the $1 million several months ago. And that's how they work. So I think this kind of flew under the radar screen. But it kind of leads me to believe that he will get indicted on this. Now, the other issue is with money laundering and with the registering as a foreign agent. That's up in the air. But clearly, there's more to this. And clearly, Merrick Garland has a key position in this whole thing. And we have to watch him to see what he does behind the scenes. Now, people are calling for a special prosecutor, and I think that likely should happen. And we'll see. But something like this won't happen until November when the Republicans take over the House and the Senate. So we shall see. Okay, just a couple of tidbits before we switch to finance and the markets. Jen Psaki is going to leave the White House, from what reports are telling me. Apparently, she is going to take a job with MSNBC. I'm not sure if it is going to be as a talking head or a commentator or a contributor or what. But look, I'm glad to see her go. She was a hack. She was quite a nasty hack, condescending hack. And I'm sure they'll love her at MSNBC. So good luck to her. Not. I just want to give an update on Ukraine. Apparently, Russia and Ukraine are still meeting for a peace treaty. And as long as they continue to talk, it's a good thing in my book. But with that said, Ukraine is still getting bombed, and Mariupol is getting leveled. And look, it's just a disaster for Ukraine. It's shameful. It's shameful what went on there on every side, whether it's Zelensky, whether it's Putin. It's shameful what they allowed happen there. Now, I've also got a report that Zelensky had fired two of his generals over something. It was very vague. And I'm not quite sure if it's true. I really take everything from the media with a grain of salt. Quite frankly, I believe maybe 10% of what I'm told coming out from the mainstream media about what's going on in Ukraine. And so that's what we have. The other thing, too, is apparently Russia has accused Ukraine of attacking a fuel depot in Russian territory. And Ukraine is denying it. Who knows? Again, it's just noise at this point. I think the deal is in Zelensky's hands to make. So we shall see. We're very hopeful. All right, I want to get into business. And one of the things I just want to talk about, it was an article that I had read this week. It was from a Breitbart. And it said here, it says, investors buy mobile home parks, raise rents for low-income Americans. And this is terrible. This is terrible what's going on here. And it says corporations are buying up mobile home parks across the United States, and owners of the manufactured housing are being hit with increased rent for lots and new property requirements. Look, I've got a problem with this, and I'm gonna talk more about this in future episodes. But we've got corporate America, we've got Wall Street, we've got firms like BlackRock buying up single-family homes, and it's preventing young couples from obtaining the American dream. And I'll get into that more. And it's just shameful. But again, it's a longer topic, and I want to put more time toward it than I will today. So it'll be one or two more episodes before I start talking about this more in depth. But it is a concern. When we talk about high housing prices right now, this can be alleviated. And I'll talk about that in an upcoming episode. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Two things that happened this week. One is that in my prior episode, I mentioned that there were key indicators in the bond market showing signs of a recession. And the one real indicator that shows signs of a recession is the spread between the 2-year bond and the 10-year bond. And I think when I mentioned when the yield on the 2-year bond is higher than the 10-year bond, that's a real indication of a recession coming. And we hit that today. And what happened is the 2-year bond ended at 2.462, while the 10-year bond ended at 2.39%. So that's a real indicator. We should keep on watching that because, again, are we headed for stagflation? Well, here's one part of it. The other part of it is inflation. So for all practical purposes, we're going to look at the textbook definition of a stagflation at some point. I think it'll be sometime this year. And some of these Wall Street talking heads are saying, oh, well, it's a year out. Now, I think that's more wishful thinking. I think because Wall Street's in bed with the Democrats, they want the rosiest picture that they can present before the November elections. And that's why they're talking about this recession happening next year sometime. So we shall see. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the One indicator that the Fed looks at, very important to them when determining whether to raise interest rates and how much, it's called the PCE price index, the personal consumption expenditure price index. And it came in high. It came in at 40-year highs. Now, they all were within expectations, but they were high. And be aware of this game that the finance media is going to play, as well as Wall Street is going to play. And what they're going to say is that, well, these numbers at some point are going to plateau and start going down. And they're going to make a big deal that these inflation indicators are going down. But what they're not going to tell you, and again, this is not going to happen for a few more months, but what they're not going to tell you is that they're still high. So if we go from 7.9% inflation to 7.8, they're going to make a big deal about that. Be prepared for that. But we all know that historically it's high. Again, be prepared for that. Let me go to the most recent GDP Now report from the Atlanta Fed. Again, it's an ongoing estimate of what the first quarter GDP is going to be. Latest estimate is 1.5%. Technically not a recession, but it's a slowdown. And that's going to be continually updated. All right, let's go to the markets. The Dow was up today, 0.4% to 34,818.27. Year to date, the Dow was down 4.8%. The S&P was up 0.34% to 4545.86. For the year, the S&P is down 4.62%. NASDAQ is up 0.29% to 14,261.50. Oil was down 1.01% to $99.27 per barrel. The 10-year bond was up 5 basis points to 2.39%. Gold was down 0.7% to $1,922.90. Silver was down 1.5% to $24.75 per ounce. Bitcoin is trading at right now, and it is, again, this is April 1st, 2022, and these are not April Fool's jokes. So Bitcoin is trading at right now at $46,168.72. Ethereum is trading right now at $3,442.97. And XRP is trading at 83 cents. And again, thank you for listening. I wish everyone a good weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday.